Hello and welcome to Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a thing. Shaun Diddy Combs is charged with racketeering with conspiracy, sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution. He denies all the charges and says he's never sexually assaulted anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. This pod is the place to be to find out everything you need to know about the upcoming trial in May. And it is still due to begin in May, even though we've had some new tactics being tried by his defence, as well as one of them quitting. Joining me to examine what exactly this all means is our resident criminal defence attorney, Shaun Kent. Hi, Shaun.
Hey guys, how are y'all doing?
You can't see, but Shaun's actually joined by two Pomeranians, so we've got guests today. We've got to be on our best behaviour, yeah. And Rolling Stone's senior investigative reporter, Cheyenne Roundtree. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi.
So let's start with the news about Anthony Ricco, not to be confused with The Charge, one of Diddy's defense teams. Here's CBS News reporting what went down.
A lawyer for Shaun Diddy Combs has quit, leaving the rapper's legal team ahead of his sex trafficking trial. In New York federal court, Anthony Ricco filed a motion to withdraw as one of Diddy's 6 defense lawyers yesterday. He didn't give an explanation, but wrote, "Under no circumstances can I continue to effectively serve as counsel."
Cheyenne, can you walk us through exactly what went down?
Anthony Ricco has been part of Diddy's defense team since September. So he appeared in court with Diddy when he was first arraigned and pled not guilty to the charges. And Anthony has been kind of this almost kind of public kind of support figure for Diddy as his lawyer. In court, he stands up and points out that Diddy's, children have traveled long distances to be there. He sits next to Diddy, during the hearing, they're talking, they're laughing. So they seem to have kind of a more personal relationship maybe than with, Diddy's other lead defense attorneys who are kind of the ones up in front of the judge. And this past week, he just suddenly files a motion saying that he's withdrawing from the case. And there's not too much detail given, but clearly there was a fork in the road about, something having to do with his case. And he says, like you heard, that under no circumstances can he effectively serve as his defense counsel.
Now, some of the terms are a bit confusing. There's like lead counsel and then defense counsel. Shaun, he's not his lead counsel. So is this really that big of a deal?
No, and those are all misnomers, lead counsel, so forth. It's just because they all do the equal amount of work. When they say lead counsel, what ends up happening is if you're in the middle of the court, you don't want 3 lawyers talking at the same time. So they basically said, you'll talk is all lead counsel means. So if there's an objection or something of that nature, that will be the person talking. So that really is a misnomer, lead counsel. Do I think it's that big of a deal? Yes and no. Legally, I don't think it's a big deal at all. But I always tell people lawyers get off of cases for 3 reasons. 1, Mr. Green has not made a gratuitous appearance. You haven't been paid. That ain't this situation. You can assure that. 2, what'll end up happening is if the client insists on lying. Like if a client says, I want to lie or something of that nature. And I don't think it's that situation because we're not even to the point where Diddy is going to take the stand and there's avenues if your client wants to lie and insist on you suborning perjury. 3, we just can't get along. And that is almost always what happens. I've said since day one, I think they're trying the case way too quick. They haven't asked for 1 continuance yet. There are terabytes of information. I cannot see that they could possibly be prepared by the time the May term comes. And it could be the possibility the lawyer just said, I don't want to do it anymore. I really think it means we're not seeing eye to eye, whether it's Diddy or other folks on the law team, we're not seeing eye to eye, and I can't go any further.
So he's definitely not said anything about Diddy's perspective. He said that there'll be no lapse in representation as Shaun Combs will be continue to be represented by 5 other attorneys of record. Okay, once again, without violating any aspect of the attorney-client privilege or otherwise providing any details whatsoever on the grounds of supporting the application, the government has been notified of the filing of the motion to withdraw as counsel. Okay, how do you think this looks to people with no legal background, no legal expertise?
I think people have taken it as bad. You know, when a top attorney quits your case in the language used, under no circumstance can I continue. I think people are just pointing at that and say, he can't defend him, you know, and making their own assumptions from there. There have been kind of reports circulating, kind of to what Shaun said, was that it seemed like there was a breakdown between Diddy's attorneys about going to trial in May, and that, you know, Mr. Ricco wanted to kind of postpone it because there is so much information here. So that's kind of been the attitude or the shift out there. But a lot of people think this looks bad for Diddy. They think it's like almost an admission of guilt from some of the things that I've seen, which of course is not the case.
Yeah, the language that's used out there, you know how it's going to get picked up on. We know what the court of public opinion feels, and we know how information travels. Could he not have said something like, for personal reasons, or would that not fly with a judge?
That would not be anything dealing with anything whatsoever, because the court, if you write down, I want to be off for personal reasons, the court's going to ask what those personal reasons are. That ain't the scenario. I think the filing in and of itself was possibly wholly unnecessary because, as mentioned, 6 attorneys. Realistically, he probably wasn't going to have a big trial roll because they couldn't have gotten along. He just didn't have to show up. We file these a lot of times because what ends up happening is we want to make sure one lawyer, one client, I'm asking to be removed. This guy needs a new lawyer. In Diddy's situation, he doesn't need a new lawyer. He's got 5 others. So I think it's kind of a shot realistically, either at Diddy or somebody else on the legal team. I don't think it has anything to do with the underground facts either, though. I think this is all, we can't get along.
And there's no formal comment from the legal team about Anthony Ricco, but Diddy's team have told us this. Mr. Combs' lead counsel, Mark Agnifilo, and Tenny Garagas remain the same. They've been lead since the raids were executed and remain along with every other member of Mr. Combs' team. And they add that Mr. Combs is proceeding to trial with a strong trial team. We'll keep an eye on the latest with Diddy's defence team, and of course we're going to update you. But now I want to do our fact or fiction section of the programme a little earlier this week, because as I was watching all of this news play out on social media, particularly TikTok, I started to see videos like these.
One of his charges is something called necromancy. Now, I've just Googled it and I am disgusted.
Guys, it's worse than we thought. It is worse than we thought. Necrophilia, apparently. Necrophilia. Go research that.
The man that defended Osama bin Laden said he can no longer defend Diddy. So it looks like everyone's got their limits.
Okay, first of all, was Anthony Ricco a lawyer for Osama bin Laden? Well, he defended one of the men who was charged and then convicted in the US vs bin Laden case, which was related to the deadly 1998 American embassy bombing in Kenya by Al-Qaeda. Shaun, you're a criminal defence attorney. You know everyone deserves a right to a good defence.
He represented some of the worst humans in the world, but everybody has an access to a good, fair, and proper criminal defense, because what we're doing is not necessarily representing that person. We're representing the system and representing the Constitution and made sure that it's gone through the right way. So everybody's entitled to a legal defense, no matter what you think of them.
So in these videos, we hear people saying, okay, he's defended people like Osama bin Laden and he's walking away from the Diddy case. Why? And saying it's because there has been a necromancy charge added to Diddy's case. This is communing with the dead, typically to predict the future. Now, trying to commune with the dead is not a criminal offence. I understand rage bait. I understand driving traffic to your page. I understand that the algorithm, sometimes you might feel like it forces you to say things that are going to get eyes on your profile. But seriously?
I'm on a stretch like that is, because that is such a damn, the dictionary definition of a stretch. And I've seen that a lot. And that's the one thing that I don't like is people are making the assumption just because a lawyer removes himself from the case, Diddy's the most disgusting person in the world. But that's not the reason why the lawyer is removing himself from the case. It has nothing to do with any other thing. People who are associating one client to another, that is a crazy, awful stretch. I didn't know what the heck necromancy or whatever the heck it was. Thought it was like, I don't know what it is. I didn't know what it was, but this is insane. And if there was another charge added, we would have all known about it because there would have been another superseding indictment.
Thank
you. If there hasn't
you.
been another superseding indictment with another charge,
We'd know about it, especially if it was black magic or voodoo. We'd hear about it. It would be front page news. But then some other people came in and they said, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't necromancy. It was necrophilia. I understand once again that this is going to drive traffic to your page. But like Shaun's just said, if there was another superseding indictment that added on a fourth charge of necrophilia, you would know about it. It would be front page news. This is more than unsubstantiated. We're going to wrap that up there. We told you what was in the letter. It didn't have anything in it about necromancy, necrophilia, necro anything.
Now, a civil lawsuit in the US accusing the rap stars Jay-Z and P. Diddy of rape has been dropped. According to court filings, the lawsuit was voluntarily dismissed by the anonymous female accuser.
Okay, so this was the lawsuit that we told you about, filed by an anonymous woman in October last year, accusing P. Diddy of raping her when she was 13 at the VMAs in 2000. The lawsuit later added Jay-Z, real name Shaun Carter, as a defendant. Both rappers denied the claims, and the case has now been dropped with prejudice. Shaun, what does that mean with prejudice?
It can never be brought back by that law firm again. It can never be brought back on behalf of that victim again. So the case is gone forever. It's with prejudice or without prejudice. Usually without prejudice means there was some type of mistake in the filing. Something was done incorrectly. So we're going to dismiss it right now so we can fix it. With prejudice means that case is what's called forever barred. It will never come back.
Who makes the decision about with or without prejudice? Is it the lawyer?
In this situation, it's the lawyer. Sometimes the judge does it as well. Sometimes the judge says, I'm throwing this case out with prejudice. Like if a prosecutor has made a huge mistake, they say, you can't bring this back. Or a judge can say, you filed this incorrectly. I'm dismissing it, but you have the right to refile it at another point in time. In this situation, when it's dealing with the lawsuit, it can go either way, but the lawyer himself made the decision to dismiss it with prejudice.
Now, Cheyenne, Jay-Z, very vocal when this was filed, uncharacteristically so. He said, I'm not paying one red penny. What's his reaction been to this?
I think he called it a day of victory because he's been adamant since before he was even publicly named, that he was going to bat for himself, his reputation, for this awful, awful allegation. And it's something to note that Diddy's team, I asked for a comment about this, and they said there was no settlement reached, because sometimes things like this, when cases are dismissed with prejudice, sometimes you think, okay, backdoor, maybe he did pay her to take the case away. And Diddy's team said there was no settlement. So something happened behind the scenes that, the woman, the Jane Doe, decided to withdraw and not to bring the case again. So Jay-Z sees this as an absolute victory lap. But it doesn't mean that he's necessarily done with the woman's lawyer, Tony Busby. If you remember, he's filed a lawsuit for extortion and defamation against Tony Busby about this case, saying that he made defamatory comments while pursuing this case, and that case is still moving ahead. So this isn't entirely just over because this one case was dismissed.
He said, once again, really emotive language. I felt that Mr. Busby was placing a gun to my head, that I either bow to his demands or endure personal and financial ruin. And he also brings in the Mufasa premiere with his daughter, Blue Ivy. What's he said about that?
So I think Jay-Z has said Tony Busby, and Diddy has said the same thing, that he is this attorney that's looking for the spotlight. They keep calling him a 1-800 lawyer, trying to kind of disparage or make, the idea that he's out just to collect all these victims and to make a big show of things. And Jay-Z said, you named me in this lawsuit right before my daughter, Blue Ivy, has this really big moment for herself. And he kind of accuses him of just, trying to capitalize on that moment for maximum PR, nightmare.
Shaun, is there not some sort of protection against this? Otherwise, wouldn't lawyers be getting sued left, right, and center?
Absolutely. Lawyers have what is called absolute immunity. What absolute immunity means is, if we are acting on behalf of a client, if somebody comes in and tells you something happened and you filed a lawsuit and then someone sues us, we'd never file lawsuits. Same thing with police officers. Same way, when we write these tickets, they do these things because they have qualified immunity. So long as you are doing stuff in the best interest of your job and profession, you're just not going to be sued. Now, that immunity stops if someone can prove that you acted with gross negligence or malice. What happens in these civil lawsuits, though, is there's something that's called a verification that is required. The verification requires that the client or the victim or the plaintiff to sign off and say, I've read everything in here and I verify it's true. So translation, I've told the lawyer everything in here that is true. If someone's lying, it's me, not the lawyer. So that's the immunity that lawyers, almost universally, I've sued thousands of people and no one has ever sued me on behalf of bringing a lawsuit.
Will Busby have to respond to this?
That's why I made a comment once that in this situation, I think it's brilliant.
I don't think the lawsuit against Busby is going to go anywhere. One, I really don't think Jay-Z needs $20 million. So even though he has filed this lawsuit for money, I don't think he's filing it for money. By filing it, he is requiring Busby to answer why the case was dismissed. Okay. There are still going to be people out there who thinks it's financial, which it is not. If it was financial, there would have been a filing. But if you check social media, still people are saying behind the scenes, oh, they paid this girl off, a shell paid these people off, something of this nature. And all Busby filed was, I'm dismissing it with prejudice. So by suing him, he's requiring him to answer the lawsuit. Like the tables are turned, the shoe's on the other foot. It's making Busby now answer and tell the court in their answer, why did you dismiss it?
And we asked Tony Busby for a response, and he said he has no comment. He didn't address the claims made by Jay-Z or the case being dismissed, but he did add, the press narrative on the whole matter amuses me. And I should say, once again, Diddy denies all the charges against him, and he says he's never sexually assaulted anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. Now, today's episode is a bit packed, and this last section that we're going to do, it's got lost a little bit, I think. There has been a new approach from his defense team to count 3 of the indictment, the transportation for prostitution charge, namely asking for it to be dismissed on grounds of selective prosecution on the basis of race. This is what they said in their letter. This case is unprecedented in many ways, but perhaps most notably and most disturbingly, no white person has ever been the target of a remotely similar prosecution. Shaun Kent is an extraordinarily successful artist, businessman, philanthropist, and one of the most accomplished Black people in this country. Shaun, some people are going to look at this and say he's pulling the race card. How much merit does this line of argument actually have?
None. Is he pulling the race card? He's pulling the heck out of it. And when you try to bring a selective prosecution claim, you just don't throw things against the wall. I've made selective prosecution claims before. But the way you have to bring it is you have to show somebody else who was not prosecuted, who was in the similar situation as you. There's that whole Abercrombie and Fitch thing currently going on. And last time I checked, he's white and they're currently prosecuting him as well. So it didn't take 6 months to find a similar prosecution that is currently happening. I think the hope, I'm assuming, is to poison the jury panel, the jury pool, and try to assume that they're going after him just because he's African-American. I don't see where that's going, because in the filing, if they would have pointed to 10 white folks who did the exact same thing, who were not prosecuted for the same stuff, he would have a similar claim. When you do legal filings in anything in life, I don't like bold assertions.
I was going to add, Ricco's name was left off of this filing. So his name was not part of this motion to dismiss this count. And I guess like the other thing to point what Shaun said is that other people have been prosecuted under the Mann Act. And, you know, Ghislaine Maxwell, you have R. Kelly, you have a lot of people that have actually been convicted and or arrested under this act. And I think the other layer to this, which is kind of missing from this, is that he's claiming no other Black man has been charged, or at least that we know of in a big kind of high profile sense, of hiring male escorts, because these other cases have to do with minors or women. And he is kind of making the connection of, I'm hiring male escorts and I haven't seen anyone else being charged for this. And this male escort service is really popular. A lot of people know about it. Why am I the only one being charged with using this site? And I think he says, you know, it's very common practice in American culture to bring in a third person to the relationship. So there's a kind of a lot of leaps and things kind of being all connected together. But so that's one of the points that I felt like people are kind of missing of what he's claiming he's being charged with that he hasn't seen. It's not just the Mann Act, it's the who he was hiring under the prostitution charge.
And just before we wrap up today, Cheyenne, something was filed that's a bit of a development in the story and something we're keeping an eye on. What exactly went down?
Yeah, so Diddy's team filed a motion about some of the search warrants that happened on Diddy's properties back in March of 2024. He is making an argument that those search warrants were extremely broad and they're wanting to suppress some of that evidence at trial. They say that prosecutors withheld some information about some things they gathered, specifically victim one. I think they're trying to argue that they didn't make clear that they've already seen or possessed some of the videotapes that victim one had. And they're kind of calling into question the credibility of some of the victims and witnesses that the prosecutors used in order to obtain these search warrants.
Shaun Combs' team have told us their filing contends that the government withheld exculpatory facts, did not present a fair picture of the evidence, and used overbroad search warrants to search his home, iCloud accounts, phones, and a hotel room. It also failed to inform the magistrate that it possessed text messages between alleged victims and Mr. Combs. We'll keep you up to date with any developments on this, either from Diddy's defence team or the government's side. Okay, we'll keep an eye on all of the developments in the Diddy case as we build up to the trial set for May 5th. Shaun Diddy Combs denies all the charges against him and says he's never sexually assaulted anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. Cheyenne, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks.
And Shaun, thanks so much for bringing your dogs and joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
That's it for this episode of Diddy on Trial from the BBC World Service YouTube channel with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. But before I go today, I need to tell you about a new podcast. It's about Luigi Mangione, who's the 26-year-old facing charges for the murder of Brian Thompson, health insurance CEO and father of two, charges he denies. The Mangione Trial podcast, here on the BBC World Service YouTube channel, looks at why Brian Thompson was killed and why Luigi Mangione's face went viral. It tackles conspiracy theories, looks into the social media response to the story, and will follow the legal case as it develops. Make sure you subscribe on BBC Sounds or wherever you get your BBC podcasts.